All right, here we are. NBA playoffs begin in earnest tomorrow. Um, Several teams have legitimate chances to make history and become NBA champions. Very good matchups all the way around. Playoffs begin tomorrow. With me today is a good friend of mine, Jackson Pellingra.
Hello.
I've known him for quite a while, and he's a very reliable sports fan. So he's going to be here today to help me kind of break down these NBA playoffs first round matchups and give me some valuable insight.
Hope I don't drone on too much. Hope I am interesting to listen to, because I mean, it's a privilege to be on this prestigious program.
This is his first time on any syndicated radio show here, so
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was that monthly show I did with Rush Limbaugh a few years back, but people probably haven't heard that. It's probably a little too old of a reference for most people. But anyway.
So just give me some of your thoughts, some kind of the blue bloods of the NBA. There's some teams that aren't here this year for various reasons. Just why don't you go into depth with that?
Well, I mean, for starters, I wouldn't call them a traditional power, but the Knicks have descended back into irrelevancy, which, as a Heat fan, let's get all of our biases out there. That makes me very happy. But I do feel for Carmelo a little bit. He's sort of languishing there, and he's probably exiting the prime of his career. And as for Boston, they need to rebuild, obviously. But they have a couple of nice pieces, although I think that we won't see Rondo there for much longer. I think they'll be shipping him off just because of his troubles with the organization.
I do like Brad Stevens though as a coach. Loved him at Butler, and
yeah, definitely.
I think he needs when they signed him as coach, I think they had given him a plan to sort of give him 2 or 3 years to kind of get his feet wet and kind of get the franchise back to where it needs to be after taking over for Doc Rivers.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there wasn't anything expected of him this year. You'd
Right.
have to be insane to expect this roster to do anything significant.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Lakers.
Where do you begin with them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the best course of action for the future is putting your stock into, and I won't even say aging, I'll say age star, who, I mean, when he's healthy, he's still productive, amazingly, but the question is whether he'll.
We're not going to mention him by name.
No, of course not. The question is, when if he even does come back to form, I personally don't think that having Kobe as your best player is enough, or even close to enough anymore. That team, maybe, if Kobe was healthy this year, the Lakers this year might have been a fringe contender for an 8 seed.
Well, I mean, just look at the players they were putting out there on the floor. You know, Kendall Marshall and Ryan Kelly.
Yeah, I mean,
nothing against those players,
no, but they're not exactly high-tier NBA players.
In their first year in the league, they should not be contributing members of an NBA roster. Period.
I mean,
Chris Kaman as
we
well.
all know that one day Swaggy P will lead his team to a title, but not to be this year. I mean, There's a lot more time for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so those are the sort of.
And of course, I mean, the Lakers' first order of business should be to fire D'Antoni, but that's just my opinion.
Well, yeah, because just they don't have the pieces to play his style. Because when he has, I mean, just look at his years with the Suns. When he has the appropriate pieces and Steve Nash not on a walker, his teams can be pretty effective. But I don't think he's right for them.
And of course, Steve Nash will be playing next season because he needs the money.
So you had a problem with that?
I'm glad he was speaking his mind.
To me, it was refreshing. Because why even put forward the notion that because he knows he's not going to be competing for a championship next season.
Mm-hmm.
So why even put forward the notion that it's super important for him to compete to finish with a 500 record? Because it's not because of what he's achieved in his career.
I applaud his honesty for sure.
And he'll give effort. He's not a guy who'll just stop trying.
Mm-hmm.
But makes sense.
Let's not forget he's a 2-time MVP.
Yeah, probably a couple of at least one pretty fraudulent MVP, but still a great player, certainly
possibly,
a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I was gonna say a Hall of Famer.
Oh, definitely a Hall of Famer, no question.
Gonna be the first Canadian / South African in the NBA Hall of Fame. But the way the talent in Canada's, the way the Canadian basketball players are coming out now, it's an exciting time for Canadian basketball for sure with Andrew Wiggins and Tyler Ennis coming out for Syracuse
and it's nice that Toronto basketball fans have a relevant team for once.
Definitely, and we'll get into that. They're taking on the Brooklyn Nets, so we have some opinions on that. But we'll get right into it. Start with the Eastern Conference. Number 1 seed Indiana Pacers taking on the Atlanta Hawks. A 1-8 matchup. Indiana has been... Just recently, they were able to clinch the 1 seed after Miami lost to Washington.
In very anticlimactic fashion, because everyone thought that the big, near the end of the season, game between the Pacers and the Heat would be the decider. That was the tone of the media around that time, but it just ended up not mattering at all because the Heat valued health more than securing the 1 seed. And as for this series, even though Indiana's had trouble and come back to earth from their amazing start to the season, this series won't be very interesting, I don't think. What do you feel about?
Well, definitely, as someone that tends to like the traditional powers or blue bloods, whatever you want to call it, I would have rather seen the Knicks in this position, taking over the 8 seed from the Hawks. But I think Atlanta, just pulling up their stats here, they got very capable players. Obviously losing Horford in the middle of the season,
sort of crippling.
I believe they were the 3 or 4
Oh yeah,
seed
they had an outstanding start to the season.
Yeah, and kind of his loss was really a crippling blow to their team. But they, technical difficulties here.
But the problem is when you're relying on
Paul Millsap
and Kyle Korver, which I love Kyle Korver as a player, but when you're relying on him as a primary scoring option and a guy who's playing, 34 minutes a game for you, you're just not very good.
Mm-hmm.
To finish as far below 500 as they did in the Eastern Conference is indicative of that they really miss Horford.
Mm-hmm. Paul Millsap obviously giving them everything he did in Utah. Very, I feel, underrated player. For the stats he puts up.
Yeah, he's just
coming out of Louisiana Tech.
He's quietly effective. He doesn't score quite as efficiently as he could, but he does make up for that with his rebounding and defense.
Just noticing this now, Elton Brand was on the Hawks
it's a name you don't hear much anymore.
I bet you he's glad to get out of Philadelphia, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think anyone would be.
But
a living nightmare.
Elton's 34 now, and obviously on the back end of his career.
Yeah, I'm sure he's more than a little bit disappointed that his career never really turned into uh, what it could have been based on his potential and what. I mean, I guess it's a long time ago now, but he was uh, talked about as a guy who could be a consistent all-star.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, his best days were in L.A. for the Clippers, but so yeah, I agree with you, Jackson, that this series really can't. I don't see this series going any more than 5 games.
Yeah, maximum.
I think Indiana.
Especially with how Stevenson has come along as a player, he's really just been impressive.
Mm-hmm. I remember him coming out of Cincinnati and really questioning his decision to leave early after his freshman year. And
Definitely.
His first year in the NBA. Just pulling up the stats now.
I mean, he's always been a capable defensive player, but really he's come on offensively quite a bit.
His first 2 seasons, he averaged 3.1 points per game and 2.5. And he probably had a lot of growing up to do as well.
Yeah, well, he's. I can't speculate to his personal life, but it seemed like he's had some maturity issues that he's. I don't know if he's gotten over them or he's just learned to cope with them. I don't know, but he's definitely come along as an offensive player.
Mm-hmm. And just looking at their starting lineup, George Hill, Paul George, Lance Stevenson, David West, and Roy Hibbert. Just looking at this, they've all played in at least 76 games, started in at least 76 games. So
yeah, but that's the problem with Indiana.
And then you look at Miami, and they were resting, their guys period. I mean, not necessarily LeBron, but definitely Dwayne Wade. They were.
Yeah, and Bosch definitely got more rest than he normally would have. And also, I think an important point about Indiana, not so much this series, but when they get deeper into the playoffs, is their bench has just not panned out like they wanted it to. Some of the moves they made, like to pick up, for example, Evan Turner, has not really panned out. Scola has done almost nothing for them.
Yeah, I'm very surprised at his stats.
Yeah, that surprised me as well. And, I mean, Bynum, I don't know if anyone really expected much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that Bynum still has the potential to make a comeback, but this was just not the team that it was going to happen in. And I think he needs to go to a team that's not in contention to make the finals. Maybe he needs to go somewhere where he can play a little bit more. But then in terms of their other big men, Hibbert has kind of regressed this season. His shooting percentage is lower than last year, and really the only time he's played outstandingly is in a couple of games against Miami. It seems like he turns it on against the Heat more than other teams.
I look at Hibbert's total rebounds. I see 6.6.
It's awful for a guy his size.
That is. Yeah, that's what it is. It's horrible. I mean, to have Paul George and David West averaging more rebounds than you is very. He needs to improve that because definitely. I mean, maybe not against Atlanta, but potentially against the Heat, maybe down the line. Obviously.
Well, yeah, they're going to need him to be a dominant defensive stopper for the series. And, I mean, that is the one, or the biggest advantage they have in Miami is having a big, tall defensive stopper really counters the style of play the Heat that the Heat play. But based on his performance this season, I don't think that they'll get that from him.
And I'm looking at their bench right now. I mean, C.J. Watson has proven himself with Golden State and Chicago. Luis Scola is obviously a a good player.
Well, he's been sort of inexplicably bad this year.
Right. Yeah. These stats here: 17 minutes per game, 7.6 points per game, 4.8 rebounds.
And it's not like he's really been declining. I mean, he was pretty good of recent years.
Well, he was a starter for Houston last season.
So it's a little strange.
And then you got Ian Meehan, Eon, Frenchman.
Yeah, he's a body to fill the roster.
Big body.
To take fouls for Hibbert.
Donald Sloan from Texas A&M.
He's really going deep here.
Really.
Donald Sloan talk.
Solomon, well, not Solomon Hill.
You want to talk about Chris Copeland for a few minutes?
Rasul Butler, former Heat great.
Yeah, well.
Formerly of the Grizzlies. He's been on a lot of teams, Clippers.
He's no Skip to my Lou Alston, but he's pretty good.
Those were the days of
Michael
Doliak.
Oh, well, if you want to go there, a little bit of
Damon Jones.
I could do a whole podcast on Vong Juju. Now retired. That's like
currently developing players in China, I would assume.
Yeah.
For the amount of people in their country, I would assume they would have produced more players, but.
All right. Well, I think we spent enough time on this series.
All right. So, So I'm saying Pacers in 5.
I'm gonna say that they'll sweep them because it's really if they drop one game, that means nothing.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the Pacers have home court advantage all throughout the Eastern Conference playoffs. So I think that could be the determining factor.
Yeah, but they do definitely play a lot better at home. You can't really dispute that. We'll have to see. I mean, it's not a foregone conclusion that they reach the Eastern Conference Finals either.
No, definitely.
But we'll get to that.
So next up on our list is Miami Heat versus Charlotte Bobcats. Heat 2 seed, Charlotte 7 seed.
Yeah, in this series, I like Jordan to average 32, 8 and 6, maybe hit a couple game winners and comfortable Charlotte victory. All right, let's move on.
Michael Jordan will come out of the box and suit up.
But yeah, obviously this series is.
In all seriousness.
This series it's pretty obvious how this will turn out. I think the biggest question will be how many games Wade will sit. Because in recent years the Heat have sat Wade for almost entire series. Because I don't think that they really need him to win this series. Or no, they definitely don't need him to win this series. But speaking as a Heat fan, these playoffs are a little bit troubling based on how Ray Allen's play and Shane Battier's play have sort of fallen off due to their age. And so I think it'll be, if they do reach the finals, they'll be probably at a disadvantage against any of the top 3 threats in the West. But we'll get to that later.
Yeah, just looking at, kind of echo that point about Shane Battier, shooting 34% from 3.
Yeah, it's tough to see.
4.1 points per game, 1.9 rebounds. I know he's known as probably maybe the smartest player in the league.
Yeah. In
terms of basketball IQ and just overall knowledge. He's in there for his defense, obviously, but he's shown in the past that he can hit big shots.
Mm-hmm. No, he did in playoffs last year plenty of times.
Definitely. So maybe that's all he needs is the playoffs to kind of jumpstart his shooting. But yeah, I look at Ray Allen, 37% from 3. That's very
that's
un-Ray Allen-like.
I would assume that's the worst of his career without looking. Maybe his rookie season, but I doubt even that. Although a pleasant surprise has been the reemergence of Haslam.
Definitely.
Because he was...
I want to say he didn't play for...
Well, he's only played in...
46 games.
But most of those have been in the second half of the season. But he definitely after sort of losing his ability to knock down that 15-foot jumper that he sort of became known
15-foot jumper and either corner baseline shot was his shot.
But he's persevered and earned his way back in the lineup, which I'm happy for him because he's the quintessential Miami guy. So it's nice to see him.
Yeah, I'm just looking at an article here from the Sun Sentinel. He got a coach's decision. Didn't play in those games. 13 of 14 games from January 21st to February 27th, and that just kind of shows you have to be ready when called upon. And if you're on the bench, just keep waiting. And I mean, he's a consummate professional.
Wait, I mean, he was an undrafted free agent, so
for sure. And
it's natural that he already has a strong work ethic and desire instilled in him.
Mm-hmm. And us both being Gator fans, I mean, we've come to appreciate the way his career's gone, and him being able to play for his hometown team his entire career. And
yep, it's a great story. As in another great story to transition is Greg Oden, who, I mean, while not...
I think it's just a victory that he's playing this season.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know if anyone thought he could even dunk anymore. I mean, you think that he jumps off the ground and his ankles just shatter. But no, I wouldn't call him a key contributor.
But certainly he could present some... I mean, I think he was the Heat's answer to Roy Hibbert.
Well, yeah, they got him for Indiana. That was the reason. So they could counter that style of play.
Right.
Now, I mean...
And you're not going to see Oden playing 20, 25 minutes a game.
Oh, I don't think he'll play at all in the Bobcats series. There's no reason to even risk that. I mean, maybe a couple of minutes towards the end of the game.
Mm-hmm. But you look at his stats, and they're obviously not impressive at all. But I think it's just the fact that he's able to run up and down the court and play. That's the impressive.
And who
thing.
knows? Maybe somehow he'll be able to expand his role next year. I mean, it's definitely possible because no one even thought that.
Because he's still only 26.
Yeah, I mean,
even though he
looks like he's 70.
Might look twice that age, but no, I mean I'm with you. I think this. Well, I think this series could be. I could see the Bobcats winning a game in Charlotte.
Sure, because they'll be sitting Wade, I assume.
I could see them winning 2 games. I don't see this series going any more than 6 games, but I see it definitely going 5. I don't think the Heat's going to sweep Charlotte.
It's kind of difficult to predict that.
I mean, all that matters is the Heat's going to win the series, and
whether
it's a game or 2 that Charlotte wins.
The most important thing in this series is preserving health. That's the
yes, and I actually think the Heat might have. Well, actually, if you look at, I was checking Charlotte's stats the other day. I think they've won. What are they? 13-4 in their last 17 games, or 11-4 in their last 15. So they've been playing some good ball to kind of get themselves into the 7 seed.
Yeah, I mean they
got a nice roster: Kemba Walker, Al Jefferson, Gerald Henderson.
They have nice pieces. I mean, to me, Kemba,
Michael Kidd-Gilchrist.
I mean, there's a lot put on Kemba for such a young guy to do, and I think that he's not quite as effective shooting as a guy who you put the ball in his hands so much should be. But yeah, certainly there's some semblance of a bright future for them, which is more than they've had as long as Jordan's owned the team. Mm-hmm. So that's something.
They made the playoffs that one year. What was that year?
Yeah, well, probably one of those Okafor teams.
Yeah.
But I think
I definitely think the future's bright for the Charlotte Bobcats, and their fans have definitely reason to be excited.
Maybe not bright, but maybe not completely cloudy like it's been recently.
The expectations will be higher next season than
Definitely,
they have been.
definitely. They'll be expected to make the playoffs next year.
In recent memory. But yeah, I see this series going 5 games, much like the Indiana series. I definitely think teams resting players. I think both the Heat and Pacers will be willing to lose a game. Maybe if they're up 3-0 and resting some guys in that 4th game. And that might be the game that they drop.
Yep.
But yeah, I see relatively unscathed 2 series there.
Yeah.
Then the 3rd series is possibly the most interesting series. It's either that or Chicago and Washington.
Yeah, I think that this one is just because of...
I think Toronto just being in the playoffs, I think, is quite an achievement for them.
Sure, and finishing at the 3 spot. I mean, obviously the 3 spot is not very impressive with the state of the conference, but still important for Toronto.
Same record as Chicago, but obviously they had a better record against them. And
I was about to say return to relevance for Toronto, but I mean, you kind of have to be there once to. Well, I guess the Vince Carter years.
Vince Carter and Chris Bosh years.
Yeah, well, they made the playoffs once with Bosh, but yeah. No, I mean, the interesting thing about this series is it's a little bit more difficult to evaluate the teams because obviously Brooklyn wasn't even close to whole for pretty much the first half of the season. But they definitely have a more than decent chance to win this series. I mean, you look at Deron Williams returning to form. I mean, there was 4 years ago you could debate whether him or Chris Paul was a better point guard. I mean, obviously that debate is moot now, but he's a guy who's very capable of being the best player on a team. And Joe Johnson, you know what he gives you. He gives you a guy who can create his own shot and not necessarily do much else, but, I mean, you need that on teams.
Very consistent player. Just looking at his shooting, 45%, 40% from 3. Yeah, he's one of those guys. I think he had a game where he scored. It was definitely in the 20s in a quarter. He went like 11 of 11 this season. And he's had great moments with Atlanta as well. And of course, I mean, Jackson didn't want me to bring this up, but they have experience with
you can bring it up. I'll just laugh.
2 former Celtic greats and Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett is obviously not the player he once was.
Well, no, I mean Garnett will be a strong asset if they enter the wheelchair basketball portion of. Well, actually, Pierce is more experienced than that.
Yeah. But you look at Garnett, 6.5 points, 6.6 rebounds. Just obviously, he's obviously at the tail end of his career,
and really, nowhere near the defensive presence he once was. Mm-hmm. Pierce has regressed, but not as drastically as Garnett. So he's still. He can still make somewhat of a difference in this series, but I think that the
Nets I believe are the oldest team in the league.
Sounds right.
With Garnett 37 and
Sean Livingston. He's one of their younger guys, and he's kind of old.
Paul Pierce 36, Joe Johnson 32, AK 47, Andre Kirilenko 32. Jason Terry's no longer on their team. Reggie Evans, 33. I believe he was traded. Jason Collins, one of the biggest stories of this NBA season, becoming the first openly gay NBA player. Could find himself getting some minutes if they were able to get past Toronto.
Yeah, I look for him to jump in and commit 2 fouls and exit the game. But yeah, no, certainly the story.
He's a good locker room guy from what I've and you always need those type of players.
Plumlee's been actually nice for them.
I'm surprised.
Yeah, I think most people are because
needs to improve his rebounding, 4.4 per game, but
for
that
the minutes he's playing
comes with time.
For the minutes he's playing, that's acceptable, I guess.
Andre Blatch having a sort of I wouldn't say career resurgence because he was in Washington and he was playing more, but he's having a decent season.
Yeah, I mean, Brooklyn, obviously, they have guys who are dangerous.
Losing Brook Lopez.
Well, that's the thing that makes me
took them.
Well, I mean, obviously they lost him very early in the season.
Took them from a preseason NBA title contender.
I don't know if they were ever really a title contender. I mean, well, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly
the talking heads on ESPN, according to them.
Sure. But
they pretty much go as Joe Johnson and Darren Williams go.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, if Lopez were with them or were playing this series, I would probably pick them over Toronto. But as it stands right now, well, let's talk about Toronto.
Let's talk about the Raptors. Dwayne Casey, I believe, should be considered as one of the top. Has done one of the best coaching jobs. Definitely of this season.
Definitely in the Eastern Conference.
Definitely in recent memory, because you go out and trade Rudy Gay, and everybody was saying, oh, they're trying to tank and trying to get Andrew Wiggins with a number 1 pick. And I don't know if they were trying to do that or not, but it certainly backfired on them in a positive way. Players like DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry has stepped up his game, and Amir Williams has always been kind of an athlete type. Amir Johnson.
Yeah, no, I mean, getting rid of Gay, when Gay is in a place where he is a guy who can get him decent shots. Oh, all right, okay. When he is a guy who can get him decent shots, he can be effective. But the problem is when he is the primary source that initiates offense, he just takes his shot selection is just very poor. So getting the ball out of his hands and into the hands of DeRozan, Ross, and Lowry, especially, has really boosted them. But I think the strength of this team is defensively. I think they're one of the better defensive teams in the Eastern Conference, although that's not saying much. But they're long and athletic, which really gives them the edge on a lot of teams defensively. But this series is
interesting
close.
Because Toronto needs to take care of home court advantage in this series. I mean, they have unbelievable fans. And obviously they'll have home court advantage in this series. I see this series going at least 6 games.
Yeah, I think that's a
possibly
fair assumption.
7. A lot of these guys on Toronto haven't played in the playoffs before, and you really can't teach experience. Definitely for Brooklyn.
Well, I just think that
Brooklyn has numerous players that have been through. I mean, Pearson Garnett, obviously, but Joe Johnson and Darren Williams have been in the playoffs with different teams, and
sure, but I mean,
Kirilenko has been through the wars in the West.
Look at Ross and DeRozan though, with very minimal starting experience before this season. Look how they've just emerged. So I don't think that'll be a lack of experience will be a problem for them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's difficult to pin down a factor that this will come down to. I think Vasquez performing, distributing the ball
off the bench
will be important for them, because I think that who do you think has more depth of these two teams?
Just off the bat, I'd say Brooklyn.
Yeah, I agree.
Because Brooklyn's main guys off the bench, you got Allen Anderson, Andre Blatch,
Plumlee,
Mirza Teletovic, Plumlee, Kirilenko. Although Kirilenko's been hurt recently.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that they're definitely stronger there.
And Livingston has been a part-time starter this season. Whereas the Raptors counter that with Tyler Hansborough, John Salmons, Vasquez, Patrick Patterson.
Yeah, I think
Chuck Hayes, Landry Fields.
I think
Steve Novak.
I think that's probably the key in this series, because I think that the starting lineups.
So I definitely think the key for Toronto is to stay out of foul trouble.
Yeah.
Because
I tend to agree with you.
Because if obviously their most important player is DeRozan, but I feel like foul trouble could be the difference in this series.
Sure, I mean, as it is in many, but this one in particular, when you don't have depth, like Toronto.
Well, I mean, it's not to say Toronto doesn't have depth. Their players.
Well, they have depth.
Players that they bring off the bench are not to the quality.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I mean by depth.
Of Brooklyn.
They don't have reliable guys like some of these other playoff teams.
But certainly they've been reliable enough to get them 48 wins. So.
Yeah, I mean they've definitely overachieved on that front.
Credit to Dwayne Casey, though. I mean, seems like he hasn't had a good season wherever he's been, and he's always been a defensive-minded coach. But it's good to see him have some success, taking his team to the playoffs. Definitely unexpected, and to be the 3 seed is very. I don't think anybody called that.
No.
So I see. I see Brooklyn winning this series in 6 games. Not to say I want Brooklyn. I'd like to see Toronto kind of make a run in the playoffs. Just to kind of highlight how far Canadian basketball has come. I know they don't have any Canadian players on their team, but it would just be nice to see Toronto kind of make a run, because they did not play one game on national television this season. And you look at all these other teams, and they had multiple. I mean, obviously the Heat and Pacers and Thunder and Clippers, they had games on national TV every week. Toronto is the only team. I know Atlanta played on ESPN a few weeks ago. Maybe Charlotte. Charlotte and Toronto have had the least amount of national TV games this year. So I'd like to see people actually get a glimpse of Toronto and just kind of how they play. And they're a very young team, and they have a lot of inexperience, but they're definitely a team to. Much like Charlotte, I mean, they have a better future than Charlotte, I think, at this point. But
yeah, because they're DeRozan is 24, Ross is 22, even Valanciunas is only 21. So there's certainly potential for a lot of growth there. This year I'm torn on this series because I really want to pick Toronto, especially because the popular pick is Brooklyn.
We're trying to go against the grain here, and
well, not that. I'm just
podcast trying to say things that haven't already been said and get that information elsewhere. Like I said, I want Toronto. I just think
it's not even so. I mean, I'm nothing against.
It's kind of a win-win situation for me. I look good if Brooklyn wins, my pride would be
the national audience will view you as some sort of savant.
I'd be happier if Toronto won.
Yeah, this is extremely difficult. I'll pick Toronto in 7. I have no confidence in that, but
I mean, I think it's safe to say both of us think this series is going to at least 6 games.
yeah. I mean, Brooklyn's been very good.
Brooklyn's been very good
when they've had their full
this kind of second half of the season.
I changed my mind. Brooklyn in 6.
Brooklyn in 6. So we're both going Brooklyn in 6.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable pick.
Just to recap, we have Indiana in 5 over Atlanta. We have the Heat in 5 over Charlotte, and we have Brooklyn in 6 over Toronto. Now onto the last series of the East, Chicago and Washington. Washington, much like Toronto and Charlotte, kind of...
Oops.
That was just deleted Washington stats. Much like Toronto and Charlotte, it's kind of surprising to see them in the playoffs this year.
I'm actually going to counter that because I did pick Washington to make the playoffs this season, so I'll take a little bit of credit for that. I mean, it's not in writing anywhere, so I can't really prove it, but I mean, you look at guys. I mean, look at just the young talent that they have, and
John Wall, Brad Beal.
Yeah, I mean, and then.
But then they're a young team, but then
they
they're
have
experienced.
They have I mean, like Ariza's been surprisingly good for them.
Yeah.
Shoots the 3 pretty effectively, and
they've got to be one of the older teams in the league. Just looking at.
Well, yeah, with their whole depth
ages.
chart. But then
having old man Andre Miller on your team will always drive up your average age, but
it's true. Approaching 40. But then I think that probably you could debate whether it's him or Wall, but Nene is extremely important to them. I mean, look at just last year how bad they were without him anchoring them.
It's going to be key for him to stay healthy, though, because that's always kind of been the thing that's held him back in his career, whether it's been with Denver or Washington.
He's clearly a very talented player, but yeah, it's just about being on the court.
And he's probably their best answer, either him or Marcin Gortat for Joakim Noah.
Yeah, well, they'll definitely have some trouble with the Bulls' interior strength. But yeah, I mean, this could be...
Adding Drew Gooden, though, was a kind of an underrated signing. Just looking at his stats, 8.3 points, 5.2 rebounds. Brings some experience.
Yeah, definitely a nice veteran sort of, I guess,
addition,
finishing piece to them. But yeah, Beal has definitely progressed. But he's only 20 years old.
Seems to be their bench has more experience than their starters, which is kind of unusual. But
well, I mean, they're trying to accelerate the progression of Wall and Beal, so you can't do that while sitting him on the bench. And yeah, I think this is Wall's chance to move from
kind of show the national audience what he can do.
Well, he's sort of like guy who's like, oh yeah, he'll be a really great player within a few years to sort of emerge into the national scale or the national audience in terms of relevance.
He's had his seasons kind of cut short by injury the past couple seasons.
Yeah, well that could be a problem in his career, although he did play in every game this year. So
very impressive, probably one of the few to do it in the league. Start every game. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting series, actually. I mean, if you want to throw out regular season series, but Washington won the series 2-1.
Yep, I'm going to throw that out. I don't think that means
Most
much.
recent meeting, April 5th, Chicago won 96-78.
Yeah, I don't generally put much stock into season series just because it's such a small slice of the season, and the circumstances of those games. For example, could be like a team is coming off a back-to-back on the road and they could just be exhausted. But on to Chicago.
Probably the team I know the best.
Yep, they're sort
Kind
of
of
your
resurrected my Bulls, being a Bulls fan this season. Kind of last season too. It's just been a real treat to see how Joakim Noah has improved every season.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, you could make a decent argument that he's the best defensive player in the league, which at his size is pretty remarkable that he's able to impact the game so much.
Seems like now this season he's become a triple-double machine.
Yeah, but who would have expected that out of Noah, really? But yeah, Dunleavy was definitely a nice addition for them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think most people thought, including myself, thought that they would still make the playoffs, but not continue to play as solidly as they have when Dang left. Because, I mean, he really was...
Dang and Rose.
Well,
obviously, for our listeners that are NBA fans, I don't think we need to mention that, but...
yeah, you could do a whole...
you can kind of compare that to Brooklyn with losing Brook Lopez, but I definitely think Rose is more valuable to the Bulls than
sure.
Lopez is to Brooklyn. But
although,
well, I mean, I guess it could be an argument.
Well, let's say Rose in his prime form, definitely, but I'm not sure we'll ever see him in that again. I think that
unfortunately,
when he reemerges, he'll be a great second option for a team. But when you lose, I mean, there's just no way he'll be able to be as explosive and make the cuts that he was reliant on. And I mean,
I definitely don't think he'll be as explosive as he once was.
And that's where the majority of his offense came from.
Right.
So it's difficult to see him as being anything more than a really good second option on the team. But in terms of...
But you look at guys that have kind of taken advantage of increased playing time since Luol Deng left. Jimmy Butler.
Yeah. Really good defensive player.
Was probably the one reason that they decided to trade Deng, to give Jimmy Butler an opportunity to get really consistent minutes. I mean, this season he's averaging almost 39 per game and averaging 13 and 5 rebounds. Just a really solid, tough.
Yeah, and super young too.
Tough player. Yeah, 24. Second round pick, so he's really made himself into a quality NBA starter.
Augustine's been nice for them.
Augustine has been a great pickup.
Because I mean,
I saw him against the Magic here in Orlando in January, and he basically won that game for him. So it's been. I think the Bulls, much like Charlotte and Toronto and some other teams, have clearly overachieved after they lost Derrick Rose. I mean, going into the season, I mean, they were up there with Indiana, Miami as potential teams to come out of the West or the East.
I kind of disagree with you because look at how they performed last year without him. About the same level in a slightly stronger conference. Mm-hmm. So, well, considering the Dang move, considering how well they've played after that.
The Dang move was a very widely criticized move.
Yeah, and I mean, rightfully so, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Or I mean, I guess it was in an effort to just not have to pay him a lot of money because there was a lot of money coming his way. So I understand it from that perspective, and also from the perspective of knowing that they're not a serious contender in the playoffs right now until they get someone else for Rose to to play alongside with.
But you never know, and that's why you play the games. I'm holding out hope that they can.
Well, as far as this series goes, I don't think Washington has enough offense.
No. I say Chicago wins this series in 5 games.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Although, I mean, Washington does have the interior guys to match up with Chicago. The problem is, I'm not sure how. I feel like Beal's effectiveness will be really limited against how this team plays defense. I mean, you have guys who already don't shoot great percentages, and then you match them up against Chicago, who is just known to...
Chicago, one of the best defensive teams, definitely in the East, maybe
Well,
in the league.
in the whole league. I mean, I think that's fair to say. One of the worst offensive teams, but... or definitely... probably the worst offensive team in the playoffs, but their defense is just so dominant that I think that they'll win this series fairly comfortably.
You saying 5?
Yeah, I think that's... Yeah.
So we both agree on 5 for Chicago. Just as a little side note, I'd like to see Jimmer get some action. Hopefully he's active, one of the 12 active players.
I don't have an opinion on Jimmer.
And I like to see Heinrich. He's been shooting the ball better recently, but to be shooting 35% from 3, 39 from overall is...
he's been a little bit disappointing this season.
It's pretty much putrid.
I mean, he's had injuries.
Yeah.
In the last couple of years.
If you're going to talk about a player that embodies being injured, it's Kirk Heinrich's right up there. Always seems to be a wrist or an elbow, or he was wearing a mask earlier this season, broken nose and ankles. And
oh, we almost didn't mention Boozer.
How
important it is for him to...
I think Boozer is the difference in them. Because at this moment, if they win this series, they'd play Indiana in the next series. I think Boozer's the key if they make that series competitive or not.
See, I don't think,
or possibly even.
Oh well, competitive, sure, but
possibly even win.
I don't think. I think they have no chance to win if they play Indiana. They don't have.
Right.
They have their nothing offensively.
Track record against the Heat is. I mean.
Well, they
would have rather played the Heat than Indiana.
They play them close, but I think that's more of a function of the games are low scoring, so they're going to be within 6, 7, 8 points.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean the teams are close. I mean, they play a style that really hampers Miami, especially. And it's a style that's not that common in the league, in this league now that's become sort of a 3-point shooting, fast-paced league, and the Bulls are sort of some holdovers of old styles. But yeah, I don't think that they have any shot if they win this series of beating Indiana. It's just they don't have any offense.
Well, it wouldn't hurt if Atlanta could take that series to 6 or 7 games, and maybe the Bulls can get out of this series by sweeping the Wizards.
I don't think they'll sweep. I think you're discounting the Wizards a little bit too much if you think that they'll be swept.
Yeah, I mean, Randy Whitman has done a nice job with their team.
Yeah, I mean,
like I said, they have more experience coming off the bench, and I think the bench in this series, as it does with most series, will play a big role. I mean, the Bulls bench. I mean, say what you want. I mean, they're very inexperienced coming. I mean, Tony Snell's a rookie. Taj Gibson is one of the best backup forwards in the league, averaging 13. You have DJ Augustine coming in for Heinrich.
Yeah, they don't really have a...
DJ Augustine is probably having his best season of his career.
Definitely.
14.9 after getting released from Toronto. But
I mean, their starting lineup is what I'd call okay, but their bench is pretty good. So I think that'll carry them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
you got Nazi Muhammad, physical player. Uh, doesn't give him much in terms of stats, but he's a veteran and a good. Obviously Noah's going to get the majority of the minutes, so he's already getting less minutes there. But Ronnie Brewer, they just signed him. Was really a good player for them 2 seasons ago, and then they traded him to New York or Brooklyn.
I don't think any of these guys will be much of a factor. But it's nice to mention.
You watch. Ronnie Brewer will be a key in this series. Just saying.
All right. All right. So we agree. I mean, it could go 5, it could go 6, but I think that the Bulls.
I say Bulls in 5. So just to recap the East, we got Indiana in 5 over Atlanta. We got the Heat in 5 over Charlotte. We got Brooklyn in, what did we say, 6 over Toronto, and we got Chicago in 5 over Washington.
And I mean, these predictions, especially Brooklyn, Toronto, I have no confidence in that prediction because I feel like
that
could go either way.
I've said it. I hope Toronto wins. The first 2 series, we're obviously very confident with. And
really, the Bulls series as well.
Yeah, the Bulls series.
I mean, it's interesting only because there's a bunch of young guys who have a ton of potential and will be stars in the league in the years to come. Well, for the Wizards that is, but the series as of now is not. I don't think it'll be super close.
And the Bulls are probably have a chip on their shoulder. They might have, because they had a real good chance of getting that 3 seed, and Toronto beat them to it. So Bulls have kind of something to prove. But yeah, this is probably the most compelling series.
Brooklyn
outside of Toronto and Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So it should be interesting. And it's always good when Chicago's in the playoffs and one of those blue blood teams. But
so how do you feel about later into the playoffs? Like as far as
for the East,
do you think that there's any real chance of anything besides Indiana, Miami?
I'd love to see Toronto. I'd love to see
Chicago. But do you actually think that
legitimate?
Yeah. Do you think Brooklyn? Because I think that's the team that is going to do it if anyone's going to do it. Do you think that they have?
Well, if everything plays out like we have it.
Do you think Brooklyn is capable of beating Miami in a series? Let's just put it out
certainly. What is their record against them? 4-0, 5-0.
They've been good. They've been good against them.
I think they're undefeated.
Yeah.
What is it? 4-0, 5-0, 4-0. I think.
They've been good, but do you think that they're capable of beating them? Based on how they're playing right now?
As someone who's not a Heat fan, I'd say they could.
Well, no,
I just think the Heat has.
Just speaking objectively.
I just think the Heat has too much talent to lose in any of the first 2 rounds. I think Brooklyn's age might show against Miami. So to answer your question, no, I don't see. I think the team that has the best chance to kind of make things interesting would be Chicago, but that's just me.
Yeah. I mean, no, like that'll definitely be if you're into defense, the Indiana-Chicago series will be interesting, but I just don't think Chicago has much of a chance to beat them in that series.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as Brooklyn-Miami, I think that you also have to take into account that I think that Wade didn't play in 1, if not 2 of those games against Brooklyn.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't expect you to. No, you look like you were thinking about it a little bit. No, I wouldn't expect you to know that offhand.
I'm just looking at Manu Ginobili.
Oh, yeah, you're getting ahead of yourself a little bit.
Started 3 games, 22 minutes a game. That's kind of. I know he's 36.
But anyway, before we
you're
confusing the audience.
Before we get into the West.
Brooklyn, Miami. I think they're saying the Heat organization is saying that Wade is healthy, so I have really no choice other than to believe them. And when he's played, he's been outstanding. And we don't need to talk about LeBron. And Bosch has really come on as a 3-point shooter this season, which is sort of a new weapon.
Norris Cole keeps improving.
He keeps being Norris Cole. Actually, Chalmers has had the best season of his career this year. He's really come on as a guy who takes key shots and handles the ball more in the absence of Wade. So that's been nice to see.
Rashard Lewis has. Last season he was kind of a end of the bench guy.
He didn't play much, and he's played this year.
This season he's a rotation member. And,
he's been marginally effective, I guess.
Greg Oden would be. I think you said it. He probably. Who knows if they'll need him against. There's been a couple instances where teams have sat guys, and then brought them in for certain series.
Yeah, well, I think
I kind of go back to the Dallas team from 2006 with Sagana Diop, not playing him like the first 2 series and then bringing him in for that Heat series when they were playing that Heat team.
We can go
Shaq.
back more recently than that. The Heat have sat Wade.
Yeah.
Within their past couple playoff runs.
But not for whole playoff series.
No, but for a lot of them,
Yeah.
for a lot of the series.
Yeah. I could see them definitely sitting Oden for at least the first 2 series.
I'm going to say the max he plays in the playoffs is 12 minutes a game, and that'll only be against Indiana. Because there's no reason to waste him, especially in the first series. Possibly against Brooklyn, although I kind of doubt it. I
definitely think the fact that we're even talking about Greg Oden is just a testament to his determination to get back and all the injuries he's had. And, he could have easily said, hey, this is it for me. I don't want to have to go through all this rehab. But, he's found himself in a good situation.
Yeah, and if we remember the beginning of his career, he was putting up Ewing-like numbers
per 48 minutes.
Yeah. So I don't think he'll ever get back to that, but if he can become at least a semi-productive guy on a good team, that'll be a lot more than anyone dreamed of, really, for him.
So yeah, there's our Eastern Conference.
Well, do you want to
preview?
Do Indiana, Miami?
We'll go all the way through.
Because I think we're in agreement that the Heat will beat Brooklyn.
We'll just make these two podcasts here for each conference.
Well, Heat Pacers.
Well, all right. So we're saying Heat's gonna play Chicago. They're gonna beat them. Do you want to just?
Well, no.
We don't have to go as in depth.
The Heat will play the winner of Toronto, Brooklyn.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So we're saying Brooklyn.
We're saying Brooklyn. I say, 5-6 games.
Well, no, Brooklyn, Toronto. I think we said 6. But yeah, I think that.
I mean for Miami and Brooklyn, if it happens that way.
It's possible they could take them to 7.
Possibly 7, yeah.
It wouldn't be extremely surprising, but I just think that. Healthy Wade pretty much playing the best basketball, really close to the best basketball of his career when he's in, will carry them. Well, LeBron will carry them, but I think that they'll come out on top in that series. And as far as the
Indiana Chicago, I think it's a very interesting series.
It's interesting, but
it would definitely be the most interesting series for me. At least in the East.
Really? Indiana, Chicago? Not
before the Eastern Conference Finals,
okay.
yeah. I just think that series. I mean, Indiana is known as kind of a physical team. I could see that series. I definitely see that series going at least 6.
I mean, it could go 6, I guess, but I think that Indiana will win that comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the conference finals,
so we're saying Miami, Indiana conference finals.
Yeah,
kind of like everybody predicted.
Yeah, I mean, things could turn out other ways, but I think.
I mean, I'd love to have. Can Toronto and Chicago play?
I mean, in theory, yes.
They can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because Okay.
Toronto would have to be Brooklyn.
That would be the ideal series. That would be the ideal series for me.
Well,
but
in terms of,
I think we're being realistic here.
In terms of the likeliness, Indiana, Miami. I want to say just initially that
it's gonna go 7 games. I mean, I'm just saying that.
I think that's probably the safest assumption, and I think Miami wins that series 6 to 6.5 times out of 10. I mean, those are sort of meaningless numbers, but they're slightly better, but not significantly. And Indiana is definitely capable of beating them. Mm-hmm. It really comes down to Hibbert, whether he shows some of the form that he showed against Miami in the playoffs last year. Because if he does that, and with how much, I mean, obviously George has sort of not lived up to his first 2 months offensively, but he's still improved, and he's obviously one of the better defensive players in the league. And with Stevenson's improvement, it'll be very difficult for Miami, especially because of the guys that they have that have regressed, like Allen and Battier. But I still think that because of that, it seems like Wade will be ready to go. And when you have LeBron, I mean, it's difficult to pick against him now.
Yep.
Not to mention the possible contribution of Odin, and maybe even Beasley.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked about Michael Beasley. I mean,
he's
pretty much
okay.
He's pretty much a microwave when he can get in there and actually get some shots up. So.
What do you mean by that? A microwave?
Scoring, he can get hot easily.
Oh, okay.
Come off the bench and start raining in threes and.
All right. I didn't understand that one.
Yeah.
Wait, but microwaves, they use radiation. Anyway,
I've heard that reference before, and I always liked it.
Skip Bayless quote.
I don't know who said it. Could have been the great Bill Walton. I don't know.
Oh, well, then I'll respect it.
Or Bob Shot Fake Night.
Yep. Maybe just another senile sputtering from him.
Hubie Brown.
We're having Bob Knight on the show next week, actually. That's why we can make fun of him now.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Tune in.
Yeah, I mean, Austin is gonna have to change his diaper, but it should be good anyway.
Multiple times throughout that interview.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about that, but
anyways,
yeah.
Back.
I'm gonna say Miami in 7 is,
that's another one. Like, kind of compare that to Toronto and Brooklyn. Like, we could go either way with that.
I think this series is closer than that one, actually.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure.
As
it should.
Yeah, like I said, if they played this series 10 times, I think Miami would have been 6, but it could go either way. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't be surprised at all. Despite Indiana not playing that well in the second half of the season, I mean, neither has Miami. Mm-hmm. And who knows what Indiana will get. Will we get the team from the beginning of the season or the team from the end of the season? Really just... You never know. And there's plenty of time for them to up their level of play during the playoffs and be prepared. So yeah, it should be exciting regardless of who wins.
Mm-hmm. So there's our Eastern Conference playoff picture. We're going to take a short break and get back to you with the Western Conference. Plenty of exciting matchups there, and we're going to break them down for you here in the next couple minutes. All right.